They are looking for new relationships and new activities.
Yes, I mean, rah-rah, that's some of it. I mean, I'm thinking of my dad, and he wanted love in his life, but I don't think I could have turned him on to a lot of the other things. I mean, he liked his old songs, and
but
he liked his old movies, and, you know.
What if they're better? You know, it's funny how you want to, it feels okay to say, I'm not going to hold that against him because they really were better songs, and the movies were really better back in the day.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, I feel the same way about the writers from the 60s that I grew up with and the 70s. Yeah. They're good musicians.
Well, just when you try to have your kids sit down. You know, I remember one time I was singing Blue Moon, and my older boy was completely how do you know that song? I said, Brian, not only do I know that song, my grandfather, your great-grandfather knew that song.
It was such a hip song.
That's what he thought. It was all new.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I must do this, Bob, because you got to get this book. It's coming out. It's in softcover. Assisted Loving. You can go to assistedloving.com, look for it, Amazon.com. You know, I don't often recommend books. I'm telling you, this one will make you laugh and cry. How long did it take you to do this? Because you collected the little stories.
Yeah, I had written columns about him in the Times when I had a column, and so it was easy. This was the easy book to write.
Really?
It's the next one that'll be harder. But right after that, I jumped onto collaborating with Diahann Carroll, the actress, on her book, which is called The Legs of the Last to Go. Aging and acting, and, you know, she's got great stories about being a senior in Hollywood.
Yes. Well,
and people coming up to her at parties and saying, "You're Diahann Carroll. You used to be so beautiful."
Oh,
but she's still beautiful.
Of course she is.
But they don't know what they're saying. People don't know.
Did you see that Stockard Channing one-woman show? It's just absolutely fabulous because she talks about these being a performer and aging, and you know, what are you expecting, folks? You know, it's kind of like, I'll still go pay money to see a Debbie Reynolds any day.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Maybe she could be on the sitcom.
Hey, there we go.
She could be the girl next door
to
my dad.
She'd be wonderful. Well, she's the blonde. Now, your dad liked Dinah Shore.
He liked Dinah Shore so much that he used to make me watch tapes of her from the 60s. And I'd want to kill myself. I mean, she was fine.
Of course.
But if that's what I had to do to humor him and make him feel loved when my mother was gone, I would sit and watch Dinah Shore with him. You know, this is like the main thing that I would say to boomers is like, let it go with your parents and just put up with it and try to find it funny.
Yes.
Because you get into a whole new level of a relationship that way.
I agree, and as you wrote, you turning that corner of not being so judgmental and not thinking too much. It's like, yeah, let it go.
Yeah.
They need to be the person they are, and don't we wish them happiness and love?
All he wanted from me was affection.
Well, isn't that really what we want from them? Happiness and to find love again.
Yes, and to get out of my hair so I could go on with my life and stop calling me all the time.
Well, now, let's talk about some of those rewards. He didn't just get out of your hair. The fact is you had a richer and deeper relationship, and then with a new person in his life, you had an expanded family.
I also got a book out of it, Paul. Yes.
Yeah, speaking as a writer.
But, you know, there were moments when he was dating where I just, because I'm such a control freak and so critical, I was like, ooh, I don't want that woman in the family at the Thanksgiving table. Oh. I don't care if he likes her or not. I don't care for it.
Wow.
And so, you know, this is what I mean. And I think what people say about the book and about me as a writer is that I'm pathologically honest. And that's what gets to people when they read Assisted Loving. I'm speaking the mind of what a lot of kids might not dare say.
Yes, well, but who gave you that ability to speak your mind?
You think my dad did?
You think maybe?
Oh.
There's a wonderful...
I got psychotherapy for free.
Hey, that's Paul. My job. That's my job. There's a reason I've been called Uncle Paul since I was about 8. You have a wonderful scene when you're at dinner, and the woman your father is dating actually has him pegged pretty well. And you find yourself agreeing with her, kind of ganging up on your dad.
Right, but ultimately, and this is the thing, as critical as I was of him, if a woman dared cross a line and dismiss him, and she actually said to him, I think you're just filler until Mr. Right comes along.
Whoa.
That's it. I found myself defending him like a big brother.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Well, when you have a parent who is then alone, and as you said, suddenly it's kind of burdensome to show up on the weekends or to get them to the doctor's appointments and all the rest, it's almost as if I'm going to criticize him, but don't you dare.
Oh, yeah, don't you dare.
What's that? Lord, help the mister who comes between me and my sister.
And my father, yeah. He would tell, if he told a dirty joke once to a date that I was unfortunately on with him.
Uh-oh.
He dragged some woman to a Broadway show, and so he told one of his rude jokes, and she didn't laugh, and I wanted to throttle her. I was like, how dare you not find my father hilarious?
Isn't that something?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I recommend this experience of going through a late life experience with a parent.
I'm going to remind you again, Assisted Loving is the book. Bob Morris is the author. Get this book. You'll have some chuckles and a tear or two, too. Bob, I can't thank you enough for making time for us here on your visit to Los Angeles.
Thank you, Paul.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for tuning in to Aging in L.A. We'll see you next time.
Need a recycling center? Call 311, the toll-free number for non-emergency services. 311, your one call to City Hall. Illegally parked cars? Call 311, the toll-free number for non-emergency services. 311, your one call to City Hall.
LA City View Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
announce who's here and who's not. If we don't get a quorum in the next couple of minutes, we will adjourn for lack of a quorum. Good morning, Los Angeles, and welcome to the Los Angeles City Council. We are here in the John Ferraro Council Chambers, room 340 of City Hall, where we meet every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. I see we are joined by many members of the public, including a class of students that are here. Nice to see everybody, and thank you for making the time to be here. I want to thank those council members who are here on time. Council members Cardenas, Hahn, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Rosendahl, and Smith. We do have 4 council members excused: Mr. Alarcon, Mr. Kretz, Mr. Reyes, and Mr. Zine. We've been informed Mr. Wesson is at a funeral, and that leaves Mr. Weezar, who is not excused and not here. So we're waiting for him to establish a quorum, which if we don't establish soon, we will have to cancel this meeting for lack of a quorum. I want to welcome the students. I'm sure Mr. Kretz would welcome them, but if I can, because I know he's excused, welcome students from John Thomas Dye, led by Russell Burton and the rest of his class. Here, if we can give them a round of applause and show them. If you guys all want to stand up and wave, we'll put the cameras on you in a second. Keep waving. And we have our teachers, Lane Fiegler, Lee Roberts, Sarah Green, and Drea Hura. Again, welcome, and keep waving. We'll get a shot on you guys real soon. Hold on. Just keep doing it. Count to 10. Cameras are coming. There you go. See? When you come home tonight, if your parents have cable, not DirecTV, because it's not on DirecTV, Channel 35, you'll be on Channel 35. So thank you and welcome, and it's great to have John Thomas Dye here, and the third grade class. Congratulations, especially Russell Burton. Good to see you, Russell. We are still awaiting Mr. Weezar. In the meantime, our agendas are made available to the public online, but also posted here and in person through the city clerk's office, and also available here in council chambers. If you'd like to speak on any of the items before us today, please fill out a speaker card in the back or in one of our remote locations, which we have for your convenience in Van Nuys and San Pedro. Put the number of the item you'd like to be heard on, or for our general public comment, which is for items not on the agenda but under our jurisdiction, hand that to one of the sergeants at arms, and we'll make sure to hear from you. We also, besides being on television, are available through the internet, and for all the students that are here today, the third graders, you can go to lacity.org, and you can watch past council meetings online or any of the live council meetings on streaming webcasts. We also have a host of information on city departments and city services like 311, which will help you get things for your community. Mr. Weezar has arrived, and now we have a quorum, so please call the roll, Mr. Clerk.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Hahn, Weezar, Koretz, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
All right, first order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
All right, Mr. Rosendahl moves, and Mr. Parks seconds. If we can go to the next order of business, please.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
And Mr. Krikorian moves, and Ms. Perry seconds. Without objection, those will be approved as well. If I can ask everybody to please rise. For the Tuesdays, we always pledge allegiance to our flag. And if I can ask everybody to join us for pledge the flag, please place your hand on your heart. And with me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. If we can please run through the agenda for today's meeting.
First item on the agenda is an item notice for public hearing, and there is a request to continue that matter to September 14th.
Okay. If there's no objection, we'll continue item 1 to September 14th. Or is that the item, Mr. Parks? No, that's okay. That's a different one. Let's go to the next items, please.
Items 2 through 15 are items for which public hearings have been held.
Okay. Any specials, folks, 2 through 15? Mr. Parks?
We'd ask 2 on special for closed session briefing by the CAO.
Okay. Number 2, Mr. Weezar.
Number 4, please.
Number 4 for Mr. Weezar. Other specials, colleagues? If not, let's go ahead and please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Okay. Well, those are approved. Next items, please.
Can we have forthwith on 5, 6, 7, 8, and 14?
5 through 8 and 14 will send forth without objection. Next items, please.
Items 16 through 26 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, if there's no objection to consideration, those are before us. And we have cards on 2 of those, I believe. Is that right?
There are actually
Oh, one.
cards on 3, 18, 23, and 25.
Call those special for cards from the public. Any other specials, colleagues, besides those? Mr. Parks?
Number 24, and could we get that out of order? We have police personnel present.
Sure. We'll take that just before public comment then. Any other specials? Going once, going twice. Let's take up the balance then. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Those are approved. And if we can go to the next items.
On the supplemental agenda, items 27 through 33 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, we've got cards on 27 and 29. We'll call those special. And Ms. Perry also calls 27 special. Other items? Mr. Smith? 32 for Mr. Smith. Mr. Krikoyan?
28 for Mr. Labange.
28 for Mr. Labange. That leaves us with 31 and 33. If nobody wishes to call those special, let's please open the roll on those 2. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Those are approved. Before we take public comment, Mr. Parks has asked for 24 out of order. Mr. Parks, I'd like to recognize you for item number 24.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask Detective Kilcoyne from Robbery Homicide to come up, and also with him is one of the family members, Mr. Porter Alexander. Colleagues, we have a very unique case that Detective Kilcoyne will overview. This is an extension of a reward motion, possibly the largest reward motion that this council has ever approved. It is a serial murder case that's gone over several years, and also with intermittent lapses as far as activity, and that includes 11 homicide victims. And let me ask Detective Kilcoyne to give an overview. We also, for the TV, we'd like to highlight a billboard that is currently in play in 6 different locations, and so which gives some idea of the progressive aging of the suspect.
Just before we do that, I think the class is just going to leave the 3rd graders real quick. We want to thank them for being here. Again, we appreciate you. And why don't we just wait on the presentation for a couple moments till they've left the chamber, if that's all right. I just thought because of the subject matter, maybe. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Colleagues, before Detective Kilcoyne starts, the billboard that is a replica here in the chambers are the pictures of the victims, and also the middle pictures are the aging process that they've done through computer analysis of what the suspect may look like today. Detective Kilcoyne.
Good morning. If you were in the 3rd grade in 1985, you'd be about 34, 35 years old today, and that's when our first victim was murdered in South Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Police Department's been working on this case for all of those years. The past 3 years, I have been in charge of a task force that we have multiple things going on, various tentacles for the investigation. We have 11 murder victims and 1 very serious attempt murder victim that she did survive at the end of 1988. We have a lot of avenues of investigation going on right now, but one of the most important ones is the continuing reward offered by the City Council here. Clear Channel and Councilman Parks' office has worked hand in hand with us for several years now on this case. We have multiple fixed billboards in South Los Angeles depicting the age-enhanced photos of what we believe our suspect should look like today. It's a single suspect for all of these cases. We know that by forensic science. And it's very important that my phone continues to ring, and one of the catalysts for the phone ringing with information is a substantial reward. It's not as much as you would, it's not as often as you would think, but we've been working nights lately in the South Los Angeles area and talking with the people that are on the street throughout the evening when we're all generally sleeping. And the reward in the billboard campaign is common knowledge throughout the people out on the street at night. So please take this very seriously. This is a serious case, and we intend on solving it, and the reward is going to help us do that. Mr. Porter Alexander is one of the victim's father, and he would like to speak for a second.
Please, Mr. Porter. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate you.
Yes, good morning, Council, especially Councilman Parks, for continuing the effort to try to bring this person to justice. It's been since 1988 I lost my daughter, and since then a few others have been lost as well. This person that's out here, he's got an agenda that something there that needs to very much be constantly aware of, that, and I hope that these boards, these places that they have out in the streets is going to help bring the community at large very cognizant of the fact that this man is still out there. We were just been told there was another body was found, not to say that it was the same person, but still in all, something going on here in the city of L.A. that very much needs to be attended and looked more closely to. The people are taking a lot for granted while he's out there dealing in the areas that he feels that he's comfortable in. You know, he's human. He's a person that's going to slip up, he's going to make a mistake. God knows, I hope that he makes it while I'm still alive to be able to witness this. But we can just look at things that's going on, the young girls that's out there stumbling around in the life that is being brought forth before them, and this guy's out here dealing the way he's dealing. Something's got to happen. With this here, billboards and things are being brought around the city, I hope this will help, and because he could be right now sitting here watching us, trying to set his program on what he's going to do next. So I thank you for letting the victims' parents come in and speak in behalf of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Also, we have one of the other parents, Mrs. Deanna Ware.
Good morning.
Good morning. If you don't mind just moving the microphone down a little bit so we can hear you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, City Council, especially Councilman Parks, for extending this reward. It's very important, I think, that this continues until this person is captured. It's been too long now, and I think this keeps us in front of the public, in front of the media. The more exposure, I think it's better. The word will get out in a widespread area that we are looking for this person and that he will get caught. My daughter was murdered over 23 years ago, and it's been too long. We need closure, and I think this reward is very important to keep this out in the forefront. And we thank you so much for this.
Thank you, ma'am.
Very much, Ms. Ware. Colleagues, as Detective Kilcoyne mentioned, this case has been going on since 1985. Victim Deborah Jackson, 1985. Henrietta Wright in 1986. Thomas Steele in 1987. Barbara Ware in 1987. Bernita Sparks, 1987. Mary Lowe, 1987. Lucretia Jefferson, 1988. Alicia Alexander, Monique Alexander, 1988, Valerie McCovey, 2002, and Janicia Peters, 2007. There's a $500,000 reward, of which any one person could cumulatively receive no more than $200,000. But we ask the public's support. And let me ask Detective Kilcoyne, would you come up and give the phone number of how people can reach you?
The best way to contact the police department is through our command post, a toll-free number. It's 877-LAPD-24/7, which works out to be 877-527-3247. We also have systems in place to collect information from online, lapdonline.org. We take text messages, we take Twitter messages, we take all kinds of messages, any means of communication. We have a system in place to collect that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, ask for an aye vote on this item.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to remind folks that are watching on Channel 35, the news media that hear it, that most of these kind of crimes are solved by somebody who says, you know, I think the guy you might be looking for is that guy down the street. And that turns into a tip that often leads to the closure of these kind of cases. And so it's important that we bring this forward. It's also very important to LAPD because they've assigned Dennis Kilcoyne, who is not only a great LAPD detective, but the president of the California Homicide Investigators Association. So he is recognized throughout the state as one of the best investigators in the state of California. That's how important it is to LAPD to solve this crime. So we hope that people will take a look at that picture. Say, even if you just think it might be the guy down the street, call us. We'll figure it out. If it's not, thank you for calling. If it is, you may have solved the crime of the last couple decades. So it's that important to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll open the roll on this reward motion, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That is approved. We'll send that forthwith, and thank you again to the families and our LAPD staff for being here on this case. And thank you, Mr. Parks, for your work on that. We'll now go to our general public comment for items not on the agenda today, but under our jurisdiction. Dr. Clyde Williams is our first speaker. After Dr. Williams will be Sean Murphy. Good morning.
Good morning. Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. The North Spring Street Viaduct widening and rehabilitation. It's actually demolition. However, it will be probably coming to council soon, and you'll be asked to certify the EIR. The EIR, unfortunately, was rushed through. The project is badly conceived. It's part of a piecemeal of transportation in the northeast corridor areas, and will be referenced as such. It's incomplete. It's inadequate. The project description is very poor. There's no geotechnical borings. There's no investigation of subsurface cultural resources, nor hazardous materials on or under the project. So, delay this one. Yeah, and also it's been referenced that it was told to be underway, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's there without any real public participation. In fact, the one event that was a public participation occurred in the Korean church and had no circulation in Korean of the notice. There was no Korean notice at all, although CD1 has a large Korean community, and it was held in their church. So we believe that this is entirely to get the $47 million from the federal government, state government, and thereby it has to comply with Caltrans, but it doesn't comply with the Cornfields Arroyo Seco specific plan that's being developed by the planning department. So I would highly recommend to put it off or not certify it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Sean Murphy is our next speaker. After that will be LaShawn Penson.
Yes, good morning, City Council. How are you this morning?
Good morning, sir.
I just send my condolences to the family as they left. I said I was sorry about their loss. I hope they catch the guy, whoever shot. Hope they catch the guy soon. Also, I want to talk about the elections. Get out and vote, people. It's very important for this election. We elect a new governor and new lieutenant governor. I hope that she wins, and I'm going to let my fans know I'm going on a summer break. This is my last day of City Council. I'll be back in the fall. Also, my choir is having a concert this Sunday at 6:30. I have a flyer I want to give to the City Council, if I may. Thank you. Tom.
Thank you, sir. Have a good summer, Mr. Murphy. We'll see you in the fall. LaShawn Penson is next. After that will be Rick Nightingale and Van Nuys. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Council. My name is LaShawn Penson. I'm coming here. I would like information concerning the immigration because I am an ex-felon, and I do not understand how someone can come over here illegally and go against the laws of the land and have more rights to walk these streets and demand us to take care of them when I'm an ex-felon and I have walked these streets and knocked down many doors and have been denied employment because of a strike that I had when this incident happened when I was a 16-year-old trial as an adult. And it seems like we always fight losing battles and the low man never gets hurt. That's one. Someone can address that. I have another one. I live down here, downtown. We have a problem with excessive dogs. They're going in the grocery stores. They're going in the clothing stores. They're going all over. I don't sleep with dogs. I think lofts are too small in the downtown area that is being rebuilt down here. It's too small to house people and dogs. I live in a 150 unit, and almost everybody has a dog. That's not a living unit, that's a zoo. I don't live with them. I think it's germy, filthy, and we're being invaded by it. And I live down here and pay rent too. And my voice is, someone has to bring some balance to this. We're taking dogs out of their habitat anyway. But when you have like a 645 square feet place to stay, and it's not even equipped for really 2 people.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your comments today. Appreciate it. Our next speaker is Rick Nightingale in Van Nuys. After that is Donna Pearman, also in Van Nuys. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, Rick Nightingale, Van Nuys. I'll tell you, I'm on Arizona still. That now Molina from the county turns around, gets on the bandwagon, wants to boycott Arizona, and you people are still pushing it. I thought this was supposed to be a free country where people do and have to act accordingly, and they are trying to protect their property, their state, and otherwise, where you people aren't doing your job because you're not protecting me and the people of City of Los Angeles and so forth for the situation that we're having regarding the balance of the budget and so forth, because you want to give everything away and you want a sanctuary city. And it turns around that then you turn around and the school board now says, the president of the school board turns around and says it's un-American, that they're going to try and teach the kids in the unified school district that Arizona is un-American. Now what I'm going to say, you might say I'm bigot or whatever, but you people, the Hispanic people that get on into politics and so forth, you just looking out for your family, not for us. I used to feel sorry for you. I went to Poly High back in the 60s, and we had all kinds of people, all races. We were the first ones that liked that. And I grew up in that, and I felt sorry for a lot of these people. But I'm telling you, I will never vote for Hispanic in any office. Never. Because you people don't keep your word, You don't do your job. You're not independent. You turn around and it's for your race only. And anybody, white or otherwise, says different, you're a bigot or anything else. This is your famous words every time. Oh, you're a prejudice and you're a bigot. And it's not true, and I wish you guys would just do your jobs like you're supposed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nightingale. Donna Pearman is our next speaker.
Okay, I was to tell the renters no moratorium if you vote for bond issues. Your rents will go increase if the property tax goes up. Anyway, so much for mass transit. Last week I left from Panorama City at 9 a.m. and couldn't get here till 20 minutes after 10. That's why I wasn't here for public comment. The mayor and the city council wants to ruin the mass transit. MTA and LA DOT has the gall to want fare increases, but the MTA wants to use that increase for rail projects only, and it's not for the local buses. They have diverting the money away from the city with rail projects and the CRA. Our city council wants to use our tax increment dollars for the CRA. Let's starve the CRA. Let me say that again. Let's starve the CRA. Let them take care of the nonprofit agencies. City council has their pet projects. They overspend and penalize the city. Daily News is lying when they say the premiums are being paid for the Blue Cross are being paid. It isn't a free lunch. And they also do the co-pays, and they also have gone up on the co-pays. City employees will not get you out of this hole you created. The city employees are already giving up concessions to save employees' jobs with furloughs and giving up cost of living increases for years. No pay raises is a pay cut. Yet our mayor continues to travel on our dime, with probably a small part of that being spent on for L.A. He gets free Laker tickets. Our mayor can afford his own ticket. Go Lakers. It won't help L.A. to pass more bonds. They will misuse your money. You will get money for what? Or federal will give you less. You won't get more. Vote no, honey. Vote no on these bond issues. This is just going to make all our property taxes go up. That's why all our businesses are going out. I see a lot of business going all out, 5 on one block. Anyway.
Thank you, Ms. Pearman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's a good reminder to everybody that today is Election Day, so please be sure to vote. Get out there and vote on a host of local and state and our federal officials as well. Mr. Labange, do you want to say something?
Item 28, I
Yes,
did
sir.
get answers from staff. It was about Dash. I'm okay to remove it.
Okay.
If you
All
wanna
right.
Vote on it when you want.
Let's go ahead.
Mr. President, that is an ordinance, and there might actually be 12 members. Do you wish to hold that on the desk right now?
We are expecting Mr. Weston, possibly. Is there another person we're expecting?
Mr. Alarcon may make it by the end of the meeting.
Okay, why don't we hold it? If you'd like to, Mr. Labange, we'll just take one reading that way if we do get 12 members. So we'll hold it on the desk, but thank you. And if not, we'll vote on that at the end. There's been a request to take 27 out of order. Ms. Perry, did you want to take that up? While we're waiting, Ms. Perry, then why don't we just take the public comment real quick on item 18. Mr. Williams, Dr. Williams, if you want to come up on 18. And as soon as Ms. Perry is here, we will begin our deliberations on 27. Oh. Go ahead, Dr. Williams, on number 18, and then we'll come back on 27 next. Okay.
All right.
For 18. Dr. Clyde Williams, El Sereno, Northeast LA, member of the LA 32 Neighborhood Council, or was. Audits. Why do we do these audits and just note and file them? Because several of the audits had specific recommendations. So why can't we have these noted, assigned to a particular department, and then brought back within a month or two, rather than 6 months or so? So it's basically, why have them at all done and waste the money if we're not going to implement the recommendations and the findings of the audits? I reserve 1 minute.
Thank you. Now we'll close our public comment on 18. If we can please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That is approved. We'll take up Ms. Perry, number 27. Ms. Perry? And then Mr. Krikorian's going to make an introduction as you come forward. Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're joined today by the third grade class of the Valley Beth Shalom Day School. They've been studying the city of Los Angeles and the city council, and they're here to visit with us. Let's give them all a big hand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krikorian, and welcome to VBS. Great to have you here. Thank you to our third graders. Ms. Perry will be taking up item 27 now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we had our first look at the upcoming budget for the upcoming fiscal year from the Department of Water and Power. Mr. Buettner has a two-part presentation. Today will be your first look, and he will be back next week in committee to give us an overview of the issues that we've been discussing for many years now. It was an excellent first cut and enables us to go deeper into some of the items that he will raise through the committee process, and I encourage you, if there is an issue that you feel you need much more in-depth analysis or information, please talk to me. Let's create a motion to take it through the committee process so that we can really use this opportunity to examine each and every issue and how it affects the ratepayers, how it affects operational costs, energy efficiency, what it does to our renewable portfolio, and the status of our infrastructure, just to name a few issues. So I am very pleased with our first discussion and look forward to continuing it next week in committee.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perry.
All right, so Mr. Buettner, you're comfortable speaking from the podium?
I'd prefer if that's okay.
Okay, great.
Okay. Mr. Buettner, welcome.
Thank you. And happy birthday. I appreciate the chance to come and talk about the Department of Water and Power and our 2010-2011 budget. Any budget is fundamentally a discussion of priorities and the resources one would have to address those priorities. And herein begins that discussion. As the Councilwoman mentioned, this budget today and this discussion is the first part of a two-part play. The second part, where we will be back next week to discuss our longer-term strategies, ties integrally with this. So I ask to make sure and caution all of you to look at the two together. The Department provides customers with reliable, safe, and affordable water and power. We do it in an environmentally responsible manner, and we maintain transparency and accountability to both our customers and the city as a whole. Since joining the department about a month ago, we've developed a four-part action plan. The first part you see here today is our budget for this year. This is substantially revised from the budget you saw just a matter of a few weeks ago. The second is we will present to our commission and to the City Council next week a long-term strategic plan. This plan will address where we expect our resources on both the power and water side to come from, how much that will cost, and some of the long-term choices we as a city have to make. We will also propose at that time a simplification of our rate structures for both the water and power side. Because of certain of the recommendations we'll make, we may revise our budget at that point in time. So again, I encourage you to look at the two together. The third part of our action plan for this year is we've begun a comprehensive business and financial review of the entire department. We're looking at customer service, all of our operating costs, the information systems we use, our supply chain management, risk management, the investments we've made to date in renewable energy and the investments we plan to make in the future. And we're looking at our balance sheet very carefully to see whether we do need to maintain such levels of cash or whether we can do that more efficiently. I'd note this is an ongoing matter. We expect this to be completed during our fiscal year. The first component is already underway. We've put out an RFP for a real estate advisor. We're looking at real estate owned by the department, first to determine what is truly core and strategic in our operations. For that which is not core or strategic, we'll go down a path to sell it and use that cash to lessen the burden on our ratepayers. Final fourth point, we continue to be in support of a ratepayer advocate. We will be making a specific proposal on this to our commission next week, and we hope that will be favorably received by this council. Before we get into the detail, just to remind everybody the size and scale of this department, we have almost 1.5 million customers on the electric side, well more than 500,000 on the water side. We have a business which spans 7 states, impacts nearly 4 million people. It is the largest and most complex portion of the city of Los Angeles. The financial statement for our department is about $4.25 billion of total revenues. As an order of magnitude, that is about the same as the general fund of the city, so this is a large business. I've noted with the red circles 3 figures I'd like to touch on. When we purchase water, power, and fuel, we essentially pass those through to our customers. Those don't vary much, or they're not under our control. Over the long term, labor, materials, and depreciation reflect the choices we make and where we make our investments. Over the long term, we can change those. Those are driven by the number at the bottom of the page, the $1.5 billion we will invest in capital this year. We have a very large capital budget. We're making long-term investments where the ratepayers and the city will benefit from for the next generation. A little discussion on the power side, what our priorities are for this year. We've identified 4 main priorities. The first is we must maintain a reliable system. The second is we must maintain the system in compliance with all applicable regulatory issues. I'll talk about those in more detail. We are beginning the transition from old, obsolete coal to a different source of generation. We'll talk about that more next week, what we can do to reduce carbon emissions and what we can do to further our plans in the renewable area. Last, we must maintain a stable financial department for the benefit of both our ratepayers and the city as a whole. In talking about reliability, I'll use poles as a proxy. When you replace the pole, you also replace the transformers and other things with it, and they're a proxy for what we need to maintain our reliability. I'd note that more than half of our poles are greater than 50 years old. That's a reasonable proxy for the useful life of a pole. In part, this dates to the build-out of our system in the valley after the war. We have an aging system. About 2/3 of our failures or our outages on the power side come from our lines, meaning an aging line infrastructure causes outages. Just a further factor to note, while our city would be better and look prettier if we could underground everything, it costs us about 5 times as much money to underground poles as it does to maintain them above the ground. You'll see this year we've materially increased our investments in those poles, and we'll continue to do that. Cables will be the same. About 3/4 of our system is above ground, about 1/4 is underground. Again, you'll see the $14 million we're spending this year is significantly in excess of what we spent in past years. We have to continue to increase those rates of spending. A measure of our customer reliability on the next page here is about 0.78, meaning slightly less than 1 time a year an average customer experiences a service interruption. The trend here is the most important figure. We try to manage that number down over time. While we do show other systems, it's not a particularly relevant comparison. PG&E, for instance, is a far more rural system. We expect them to have more troubles with their lines than we do. Just touch briefly on some of the challenges we face in regulatory compliance. In the air quality realm, we're dealing with regulations which were put in place nearly a decade ago. We will continue to replace in-basin electric generation because of this. That will cost us about $1 billion. Again, those regulations have been in place for a decade. We are, for instance, repowering the Haynes facility this year, spending about $250 million, which emanates from that regulation. Talk about AB 32 and greenhouse gas. We'll defer much of that discussion until next week when we talk about our long-term resource priorities. One issue I would like to highlight your attention on today is a set of regulations which have recently been enacted by the State Water Board. These have been under discussion for many years, but their final rules were just issued this May. This involves the use of ocean water to cool turbines. There is no turbine that is 100% efficient, so you have some heat loss. You have to dissipate that heat either into the atmosphere or into the water. What has been done historically in California is to use cold ocean water, which helps our turbines operate most efficiently. The preliminary estimates of these rules, which would require us to eliminate water cooling, are about $1.7 billion. We're revising those estimates. I actually expect them to be somewhat more. If unchanged, this one regulation will cost us about $1.7 billion. That would cost about $150 million a year in additional rates for our ratepayers. That alone would cause us to have to increase rates 5%, just that one single thing. This is a relatively informed council, but I guarantee you that none of you could name one, if not all five, of the State Water Board commissioners. This is a great example of California regulation run amok. I have 4 young kids. I think we have to do everything we can to make the environment a better place than we found it, but at the same time we have to do it in a way which is sustainable and our ratepayers can afford. We'll talk more about that next week. The source of our energy, principally coal. That is where the lion's share of our carbon emissions come from. Again, part of the plan we will propose to you next week begins to address that issue. In the power budget, again, about an equal split between things we purchase from third parties, both power and fuel, and our own labor, materials, and capital costs. Our expenditures this year, about 3/4 reliability, 1/4 regulatory. I mentioned the Haynes repowering. The reliability all goes into system maintenance, poles, transformers, and the like. We need to maintain a stable financial position. You'll see we generate about $900 million of cash flow. We pay our interest. We pay our current maturities of debt. We pay the city transfer. We invest in new capital. We will borrow an additional sum of money to replenish our cash reserves with an ending balance of $953 million. I will address the need or lack thereof for that $953 million next week in our strategic plan. I've shown, just for example's sake, the coverage which is needed to maintain our AA rating. The requirement is 2.25 times. That just takes the $890 million figure cited above and divides it by interest and current maturities of debt. And you see we're barely above the 2.25 figure. On the water system, again, the 4 priorities there: regulatory compliance, infrastructure, developing our local water both through recycling, conservation, and using it more efficiently, as well as maintaining a financially stable department. I'll use mainline pipe replacement as a proxy for reliability investment, infrastructure investment on the water side. This is a picture I'd prefer to see, which is preventive maintenance. It looks a lot better than the picture we've all seen with the fire truck parked in a ditch that looks somewhat like this. We have, again, an aging infrastructure. 64% of our pipe is greater than 50 years old. This will last somewhat longer than 50 years, but we have an aging system. Again, you see the amount of money we're investing this year, $42 million, substantially in excess of the funds we invested in past years. We have to continue to invest in our system. Regulatory compliance, 2 main headlines. We have to, by law, maintain a positive pressure closed system. Closed system meaning we need to cover our reservoirs. That will cost us about $1.6 billion. We're partway through that program. In addition, we're going to switch our disinfectant from chlorine to chloramine. That allows us to more readily transfer water with other water districts. We can avert or avoid certain capital expenditures, so we do that. These are all regulations which have been in place a long time. We're just now beginning to satisfy some of them. You will see that expenditures in this year will rise in the water department to cover these costs. Source of our water, about half comes from the California Aqueduct, the Sacramento Basin via Metropolitan Water District, a little more than a third from the Los Angeles Aqueduct and the Owens Valley. The aqueduct will do a little bit better this year because of snowpack. I would note that more than a third of our water, which we historically have taken from the Owens Valley, now remains there to mitigate issues in the basin. We'll talk about that next week, but we're spending in excess of $70 million in the Owens Valley on water. Local water resource development, centerpiece is water recycling. This is the so-called purple pipe projects where we're taking water from a treatment plant, purifying it to a certain extent and using it for golf courses and industrial use. To date, it's been a rifle shot approach. We're working on a master plan. Ultimately, there will be purple pipes throughout most part of the city. We continue to invest heavily in water conservation. I would note that the city as a whole has reduced its water consumption in an amount greater than the cities of Long Beach and Santa Monica combined. We've had a very good performance in that area. Our water budget, Again, we purchase water from third parties, ranchers and
I'm sorry,
NWD.
just to clarify that point, it's not that we reduced more than those two cities, we reduced more than their water usage?
Correct.
Total water usage in the cities.
Correct. And about $500 million here in labor, materials, and depreciation. Spending this year is about equally split between infrastructure and regulatory compliance. Again, expect the regulatory compliance figure to go up as we complete those projects. Cash flow of this system, again, similar algorithm. We generate about $350 million with which we use to pay interest, debt maturities, and make our capital investments. We target an ending balance of about $200 million in this system for operating stability. Let me talk about a moment our workforce, which is one of the great assets of the department. We need highly trained and highly specialized people to conduct most of the affairs that the department does. A lineman, for instance, takes about 3 years to be trained. We invest in excess of $250,000 to train that individual. They are highly sought after. Yet at the same time, we have an aging workforce. If you combine or look at the figure of 224 individuals who are nearing retirement with our open positions and the current need, you can see we need to continue to invest heavily in a trained workforce. The level of our workforce will vary with our project activity. So volume of water use, volume of power use may go up or down modestly in a particular year, but our workforce levels are a function of the projects we're doing. As you see increasing projects, we're trying hard to hold the line on our workforce. We'll spend about $75 million training folks. We will also spend about $25 million on safety. I would note in the history of this department, 108 years, we've lost 218 lives while working for the department. That's actually more people than have perished in our fire department. So safety training is very, very important to us. Budget changes. This is a pretty important topic. The preliminary budget was presented to this council a few weeks ago. Since I've joined, we've made $263 million in reductions. $189 million are gone. Those are expenditures we do not need to make. $74 million has been deferred. All of these reductions and deferrals have not compromised safety, reliability, or our regulatory compliance. Customer service. The centerpiece of our customer service is our billing system. As we evolve to a smarter grid, we need a smarter bill. The first and obvious question I asked when I joined is, why don't we bill monthly? We don't have the capacity to do that. We have an information system which is based on COBOL programming, and although we have quite a number of experienced hands in this room, I don't think anybody was a COBOL programmer in their lifetime. If you went to the IBM Museum, you'd see a picture of Mr. Watson and a picture of Mr. COBOL. We've authorized those expenditures. We expect by 2012 to have a new billing system in place. We're not going to wait for that. However, we will issue a revised bill later yet this year, which will make things clearer to our customers. We'll continue to invest this year in conservation and use our federal stimulus grants wisely. We're also making a greater effort in terms of our communications both with neighborhood councils and our communities, as well as City Council itself. We just had a presentation yesterday to business users. We have one this evening in the Valley to neighborhood groups and customers. And I'm here today at my own volition to present this to Council. Talk about rates. Believe it or not, this is actually the simplified version of rates. The actual version, you need the 3D holograph. On the power side, we will have, as of July 1st, the 5%, 0.6 cents a kilowatt increase that was passed by this council. This financial plan assumes the continuing 0.1 cent increase in ECAF, which had been part of the plan before. We're working in our strategic plan to see if we can mitigate those and to see if we can adopt a plan which has no further increase for the remainder of the year on the electric side. We're also working on rate simplicity. As I mentioned earlier, we will propose a rate structure where the only pass-through cost will be fuel. Everything else will be part of the base rate, and therefore our commission and this council have a chance to opine on that. On the water side, we'll also be proposing a simplified structure. If I could simplify this chart, I would say that Tier 1 customers should expect to pay about 3% more. Tier 2 customers, meaning our heavier users of water, about 8% more. The lion's share of those increases deal with regulatory compliance expenditures that under law we have to make that were committed to some years ago. We're often asked, where does our money go? This is an example of an average monthly bill for a residential customer. This is pro forma for the fiscal year 2010-2011. So, for instance, fuel costs about $9 out of the bill. The city transfer costs about $5.22 out of an average residential bill on the electric side. On the water side, water we purchase from third parties is about $10 of a monthly water bill, and labor is about $17 out of that same bill. Just to summarize and make a few points, in a month we've developed an action plan. I mentioned that action plan has those 4 parts. We have reduced our spending in this current year by $189 million, as well as deferring an additional 74. We have enacted a hiring freeze in the department. Only exceptions to that are critical positions, which I will personally sign off on. If we can hire a lineman, we would. Other than critical positions, we will not be hiring. We're preparing a long-term plan. We expect to share that with our commission and with this council next week. We have launched a thorough review of our business and business practices. We expect that to bear fruit in the forms of additional cost savings. And we are implementing a ratepayer advocate. We will make a concrete proposal to our commission this week. Again, I hope that's adopted favorably by this commission. Again, I thank you for the chance to make this presentation. This is our attempt to define some of our priorities and the resources to address them, and also our attempt to communicate more transparently. I'd be delighted to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buettner. Ms. Perry, and then Mr. Rosendahl.
Mr. President, I'm willing to be the last speaker, or second to last.
Sounds good. You can be last. Mr. Rosendahl is next, then.
Don't go on.
Mr. Rosendahl?
Thank you very much, and it's refreshing to have an analysis that's simple enough for a guy like me to appreciate, but the dimensions and the seriousness is obvious. First, your discussion about a ratepayer. My community is very impressed with the open meeting you had the other day, where you took questions, you explained things, they left positive. Describe a little bit more about what the rate advocate would be in your mind.
Sure. Ratepayer advocate in our mind is very simple. This would be a few individuals with whatever outside resource we all collectively deem appropriate to study the policies and practices of the department and to present an informed and objective third-party view on any recommended rate action, any existing rate action, and the overall affairs of the department.
Because the general attitude by the community has been, they raised the rates again, we don't understand why, nobody explains it to us. And I'd like to understand why we're in better shape than Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric.
Well, I think it's worth noting that this department historically has been a foundation, a bedrock on which this community has been built. We have very hardworking, talented people who plan for the long term. I think there has been a lack of clarity, perhaps, with our constituents on where our money goes and why it needs to be spent. We're hoping to remedy that, and we found that people who are better informed, we can then have the debate about what the priorities are, but first we need to inform people, and that was our attempt in meeting with the neighborhood groups as we have done.
I met with the Kentwood Homeowners Group in Westchester on Saturday. The room was packed, and one of the constituents got up and said, you know, street services and DWP don't seem to be working together. They go like this, he said. They pave a street, and then we see a pipe underneath that is an old pipe that needs to be replaced. What kind of cooperation and coordination do you see going forward with the other parts of the city when there's a pipe underneath the street and all of the other wires, that we don't waste money and we do it right?
I think it's a very good point you make, Councilman. Part of what we're trying to do is articulate our long-term plans and better communicate them. Again, that provides a foundation to collaborate with other departments. Hopefully they do the same, and we can coordinate. So if we have to fix something under the street, pave the street once, not twice.
And the last point I have is the $1.5 billion of infrastructure needs that need to be spent. What's your time frame of spending that $1.5 billion, and what kind of improvements will we see?
Sure. That $1.5 billion is just for this year. And we should expect to see or maintained reliability. That 0.78 interruption figure we'd like to continue to drive down, and we need to maintain ourselves in regulatory compliance. And so if you see the split of those numbers, it's both to be more reliable and maintain our compliance with regulatory rules.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mr. Cardenas and Mr. Parks next.
I appreciate your presentation. One of the things that came to mind is something that's always a big problem with big corporations, big government, et cetera, big organizations like the largest water and power district in the country, which is the LADWP. When it comes to information systems, it's not cheap and it's usually not quick and it's usually a delicate transition. You mentioned a couple times in your presentation about the information system, and you actually mentioned the language that was being used. I'm not offended that I knew a little bit of COBOL when I was going to college, but it's a long time ago. But you're absolutely right. For a system to be using that language, obviously it's outdated. It needs to be upgraded. What's the time frame and the cost that we anticipate so far as to what it's going to take for us to get there and transition into a new modern system?
It's a good question, and again, that is a foundation for how we enact better with our customers. We've just authorized that expenditure. We expect to complete the vendor selection very, very shortly. It'll be about 2 years. It'll take us somewhat in excess of $50 million to migrate our information and to put that other system in place.
$50 million, that's awesome, because a few years ago when I was discussing with some big energy providers, utility providers in California, one of them was pretty excited that they had spent about $300 million, and they were pretty excited that they were able to keep it that low. Again, that was about 6 years ago. Obviously, modern technology and efficiencies, thank God it's cheaper. But had we upgraded a few years ago, I think we would have been upwards of $150 million. So,
well, I think the other thing one has to do carefully is make sure your process is changed to conform to your system. And so we're looking very hard at our process to make sure that we spend the system money wisely.
And one of the practical reasons why we need to upgrade the system is because this system is old, and if we made major changes or what have you, we could accidentally break it, correct?
Well, not only break, there are changes we'd like to make that we can't. It just won't accommodate the change.
But that's what I mean. If we don't try because we know better, but if we did try, we'd run the risk of breaking the system because it is older. Doesn't have the capacity of adding on, for example, announcements within our system. We have to do separate leaflets inside of the envelope instead of just being able to add additional items to the bill. That's my understanding of how old it is.
We don't want to put our, however fragile system it is, at risk. And ultimately, with a smarter system and information from a smart grid, we should be able to send price signals to customers. We should be able to vary by day, date, time, and usage what people pay for power and water. I think that will allow conservation and allow our resources to be used more efficiently.
Okay. And also, if it's appropriate or if we're able to do so, we could, in the near future, have the department give us a breakdown of what the makeup of our workforce is, especially when it comes to native Angelenos. I have a lot of people who are skilled and who have applied with the Department of Water and Power, and I'm very happy to run into them a couple years later, and they say, yeah, I put in an application and what have you, and nothing happened. So what I would like to find out is first of all, what the makeup of it is, especially when it comes to the geographic makeup of where our workers are coming from. And then before they get hired, maybe they get hired and they make good money and they move out to somewhere else. That's fine. That's their business. But at least what I'd like to see is to whether or not we're pulling from our own Angelenos when it comes to hiring new people. And my last question, Mr. President, is when it comes to business customers or customers in general, is it common or uncommon for water and power providers, whether it be a municipal water and power district or a private one, for them to have different categories of rate system based on a contract that, say, a big user might want to sign saying, if you give me this rate, I'll commit to signing it for 5 years or what have you. Is that common or uncommon in the industry?
I think you'd say differentiated pricing by types of customers, certainly in the industry, whether it's by contract or time period, we'd have to study that more carefully for a particular customer. But I think, again, a better billing system allows us to more customize what we do for our businesses.
Well, it's my understanding that the Department of Water and Power has engaged with some of our bigger customers that have been willing to negotiate with the department, and they have had contracts for 5 or 10 years or what have you, committing to certain rates and certain usage. What I'd like the department to do is to start looking at what we've been doing in the past, whether we're still doing it, if we got away from it, why we did, and then for us to have a business from a water and power vantage point, business reason as to why we are or aren't engaging in that, and if we are or aren't, what will we do in the near future, because we have some big customers that have had some rate changes, and when you're consuming millions of dollars a year, those rates do make a difference, and if they're going to be pulling on our system with a certain reliability, maybe it does behoove us to actually look into it specifically.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we need to make sure we support those customers. At the same time, it's a closed system, so what they don't pay, someone else does. So we have to make sure we balance those two.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Parks is our next speaker, then Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Buechner, I want to first of all say thank you for your staff putting together very quickly a meeting in South LA on Crenshaw for Monday. And one of the questions we've been asked over and over is whether your schedule will allow you to be there personally on that meeting, because it will service primarily the 8th, 9th, 10th, and probably the north part of the 15th district.
I'll certainly make every effort. I don't know my calendar off the top of my head.
That was a question that was mandated I asked you. Let me go through a couple of things quickly and ask, in the sense you mentioned earlier about a hiring freeze within the department, how does that affect transfers that may be coming from general fund positions?
We have a hiring freeze for the department, irrespective of where people come from.
Okay.
The only exception is for critical classes, and those critical classes, for instance, I use an lineman, so we'd hire an experienced lineman tomorrow. There are certain instances where someone with city experience could replace someone else who might go into a critical position, but we do have a hiring freeze in place. It's obviously going to restrict the number of people we could hire from the city.
Do you know at this time how many transfers you've been able to absorb?
I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Okay, we can get that for you. Let me ask you the other thing. You mentioned earlier, and I may not have the numbers correct, but I think you said you had about over $100 million of savings and about, I think, $80 million of deferrals.
$189 million of savings and $74 million of deferrals.
What I was wondering then, the next question is, as part of our budget process, we asked whether the initial $20 million that was offered as part of the transfer, is that an item that's forthcoming or realistic?
It's not forthcoming to expect that. We will make firm commitments as to the city transfer in the coming year and some recommendations to simplify that and perhaps eliminate some of the last-minute drama.
Okay, but the $20 million that was put in the DWP reports, we should not have an expectation of that?
That's correct.
Okay. Let me just ask a couple other things, and this is something that I never understood. They talk about the use of coal and 70% of our, I guess, the energy that we absorb and then the emissions. What is the figure of that 70% as it relates to the emissions in the city of Los Angeles or the state of California? Is it primarily in the state of California, or is that 70% use of coal outside of the state of California?
It's outside the state of California. It's in our Utah and Nevada facilities where the coal is burned.
It's still part of our renewable reducing the emissions.
By law and by rule, they measure the source of energy as it comes into our system. So it counts in our system.
It makes no difference where it comes, if it comes into the system.
That's correct.
Okay. The other issue I was wondering is that the state law, I forget what the section is, gives a certain percentage to meet by a certain year. The city has chosen to, I guess, almost double that. At this time of financial stress, is that a realistic goal? Go beyond?
I think you'll hear next week in the second part of the presentation we'll address that very directly.
Okay. And then one item on polls. One of the things we've not heard before is whether there is an efficiency and a cost saving. We hear the difference between putting a pole in, 13,000, 15,000 versus underground 5. Is there an efficiency figure as far as reliability, reduction of maintenance and things of that nature that would balance that 5-time figure?
It would ameliorate it somewhat, but it would be a small fraction of the 5 times. The capital investment and the cost to underground, if it's 5 times, you might save 10% or 1/10 because of reliability, but it wouldn't be that significant.
And in carrying on with Mr. Rosenthal's question about the issue of whether we coordinate well, it just seems as though there are times in which funding is available for sewer repair or 1B money on such as Figueroa or Crenshaw or the expo line, whether there's a way to leverage DWP and undergrounding with some of those projects that are forthcoming where there's revenue that's tearing up the street, changing curbs and things of that nature, as opposed to tearing them down and then replacing them with poles or new poles once we've gone to that point.
I mean, that's a good suggestion. We should sit down with them. I think what we intend to share is our infrastructure plan, and if we knew theirs, we could see where the two match up and perhaps make some savings there.
Yeah, because those are things that I think, as we see with holes on streets or streets that are being torn up and then come back and tear them again, often we do not get the benefit of these large sums of money for sewer repair or a 1B money such as Figueroa, in which it appears that we'd be able to make some movement on undergrounding as part of those projects if we were leveraging with the affected people or city agencies. So we'd ask if you could look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. If I can ask you to press your button after that for the second time.
I'll push my button.
All right, thank you. You go ahead if you had an answer. Mr. You don't have anything else on those? I'll call on our next speaker. Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Buettner, welcome. Thank you for your presentation. You made reference to smart grid technology, and of course the federal stimulus package had as two of its primary energy-related components smart grid, infrastructure, and energy efficiency as two of the categories. Can you talk about what DWP expects to receive from the federal government in RF funding in those two areas this year and in coming years, number one? And number two, can you talk about more specifically, does the infrastructure investment program that you're now discussing include an investment in smart grid technology? And if so, to what degree?
Sure, we have about $60 million we're investing in smart grid. That will make a difference, but to give you some order of magnitude, if we're investing $1 billion in the power side, it doesn't move the needle much, but we are going to be using those federal monies to help further our efforts and do some things in smart grid.
Okay, and have you made any assessment of what efficiencies, what system efficiencies that might produce that would enable you to reduce future investments in infrastructure if there is sufficient demand response that is encouraged by the smart grid technology?
It's a good question. We hope to find efficiency. Part of the $60 million is really a pilot to see exactly what comes from it.
Okay. Now, on your budget changes chart that you put up, it's not part of the PowerPoint, but on the chart that you put up, on the energy side, there was a list of cost reductions, and one of the comments, can you bring that back up, please? Maybe I can just cut to the chase while they're bringing that up. There was a comment on your cost reduction chart that said that made reference to energy efficiency, solar incentives, and information systems. Yes, next to contracting. Can you talk about what? I'm not sure what that comment means. Are there reductions in contracts relating to energy efficiency and solar incentives, or are those reductions that you expect to realize because of efficiencies?
These are reductions in our spending. Again, to be within the current rate structure and within the 6-cent ECAF, this is what we can afford to do. We've had to make certain reductions in those areas to spend less accordingly.
So $128 million in reduced contract spending for energy efficiency programs, solar incentive programs, and information systems programs?
A variety of other things as well.
Okay. So is this an amount that is net? Because all of those programs obviously produce long-term cost savings as well. So how are we penciling out the $128 million in cost reductions if we're losing longer-term savings as a result of reducing those contract expenditures?
Well, again, differentiate what happens at the department from customers. So certain efficiency savings are borne by a customer, not necessarily by the department. Because
the
of the rates,
department does as well because of reduced infrastructure expense if you have reduced load.
Sure. This is a current period measure. Obviously, there'll be future costs offsetting some of that. And we expect, again, next week when we present our strategic overview, some of these investments will return, but they'll be funded differently other than through a rate increase.
Okay, I'll press my button again. Thank you very much.
Mr. Labange is our next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Buter, thank you for coming over, and thank your staff, many that I've worked with over time. A couple of things that people have mentioned, one about the street work and coordination that takes place there. There has been great improvement in that street work, but at the same time, things break and we have to get into the city's street, and that's just one of the challenges. I know we'd like to see better coordination, but the department of, as a regulation that they have to abide, that we should change members, that it stops them from doing work in the streets during rush hour. Because there's a lot of massive projects that if they could get in and get out, the sooner the pain, the better. We need to coordinate with Mr. Rosendahl, the transportation chair, DOT and DWP, because they will pay for the cost, and I'm told by your engineers, of the needed to have the traffic mitigation, some of that issue. That's an issue that I'm going to take up with your staff and work on that. On the issue of reclaimed water, I remember when the Los Angeles Greenbelt project was first done. That was last century. I don't think there's been a major, I'm not going to ask you the question, but staff, when's the last time we've done a major reclaim line? 10 years or more. We have to do more reclaim lines. It's water that's real important. And I right, Jim McDaniels? More reclaim lines. Very important on that. The other thing I wanted to say is you have to tell your story, as you did right here. The Department of Water Power has a great history, and the only way you're going to get greater is tell the story so the people of Los Angeles know and appreciate it. Our rates are significantly lower than other parts of the region and the state. And also, the fact that we own this facility, the dividends don't go to the stockholders of these private utilities, but they go back to the people of Los Angeles in improvement. So that's real key to me as well. I also wanted to say you're going to come up with a new bill that's going to show the municipal side of the bill and the water power, two different colors, which is good. I think that's real important. And I also wanted to say, too, that I think, you should allow people, this is a small thing, but all of a sudden you shut out a school teacher who retired, who worked in Van Ness Avenue. She would park on Fremont Street by that fire station down next to the Harbor Freeway and walk all the way up to the music center. She used to park at DWP. Now, I think you could figure it out to allow the people who go to the music center to park there. It's a small thing, but it was, if you go back to that point when you shut people out and started your slide, you've got to be more community friendly, which you are. And that's just one thing I'll bring to your attention later. Tell the story, tell people where this power comes from, and lastly, the question is, with the Arizona situation, has there been any feedback professionally throughout the power and water systems?
None whatsoever.
No one's called you from Arizona and said, hey, Austin?
Some gentleman from Arizona sent a letter to the mayor. I think we responded to that, and I think that set the record clear. We own our facilities in Arizona. By law and by right, we'll continue to take power from those facilities. End of discussion.
Very good. End of discussion. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you coming over here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Rezar is our next speaker.
Thank you very much. Hello, Mr. Buettner. Thank you for your presentation. If you could quickly again summarize the proposed water rate increase, what will that new revenue be applied to within DWP?
Sure. It's about roughly 3% for an average Tier 1 customer, about 8% for an average Tier 2 customer. That will be used for regulatory compliance, meaning we will begin or continue to cover our reservoirs. We'll continue the transition from chlorine to chloramine and all of the other things we need to do to maintain a regular compliance. It will also be used to continue to replace mainline and trunk lines and all those projects which are ongoing.
So regulatory compliance and infrastructure.
Correct.
All those things. Now, the regulatory compliance, that's always been there. What's different in terms of having to get new revenue from our water users?
Well, I think always been there and always having been paid for are two different things. I would note, for instance, I talked about on the power side, once through cooling, it's known This council knows about it, people know about it, but the actual costs will show up 5 or 7 years from now. And I would say the same thing is happening on the water side. These are expenditures which were authorized many years ago. The rules have been in place for many years. We're incurring the costs now to actually build the reservoir covers, to actually make the transition from chlorine to chloramine and so on. So costs will go up in this business based on capital commitments we make for the long term. It doesn't, the year-to-year fluctuation, this isn't a surprise. This isn't something that's changed in this year's plan. These are commitments that were made to many years ago to comply with laws that have been in place for an equally long period of time.
Okay. And we have a 10% reduction in the usage of water. I think I'm correct. Well, there's some percentage reduction from what we've had. The demand is lower. I would assume we're receiving less revenue. What impact does that have on your proposed rate increase?
Our rate increase takes into account current usage as well as forecasted usage.
And the forecasted usage is less, correct? So we will receive less revenue. Is that accurate? So some of the
There's an adjustment factor to make up for some amount of conservation. So even if you use less, you'll pay slightly more for the units that you do use.
Okay, so we will be paying a little more because there's less usage.
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay. And also, on you're also the point person on business development. What are we doing to retain, or that some of these increases do not have a huge impact on some of our industrial or commercial or large users of water or electricity when those rate increases, if they ever come to us? What are we doing so that some of these companies do not decide to leave the city if, in fact, they cite some of these rate increases as being too much for them? They could go elsewhere. They could go to a neighboring city and find their fees lower if that's the case.
Sure. The first line of defense, to be honest with you, is to manage our costs, to make sure that we're reducing current period costs as we are, to make sure we are, as policymakers, aware of the long-term potential burdens and costs like one-through cooling. That's first and foremost the most important thing we can do. Now that we have a cost structure, we try to mitigate it, but it's a closed system. So while we can, as Councilman Cardenas suggested, we can enter into long-term contracts and other things which benefit the system, but it is a closed system. So if business pays less, residential customers pay more and vice versa. So we have to strike that balance. But the single most important thing we can do is to reduce our current period costs, which we are, and to make sure as policymakers we are active not only locally, but statewide and nationally when we see large looming additional costs like one-through cooling, and doing all we can to avoid that or mitigate the costs in Los Angeles. As I mentioned, that alone is a $150 million annual increase in our costs, and it will not be voted on by this council. It will not be voted on by the taxpayers or ratepayers in the city of Los Angeles.
Okay, great, thank you. Two more questions. I think my time is over, so let me ask one more question, if that's okay.
One please, and then...
Thank you. I put in a motion to request from the Department of Water and Power that the budget be put online on the internet. I was often asked by the public, how can I get a handle or see what the budget is? And I said, you should go online, and a lot of the folks told me that it's not online. It's a request. I hope that you could do it administratively or perhaps assist us with that.
What we are actually doing is this presentation is online. There is a video of me presenting this, which is online, as well as the detailed 5-inch deck is also online. So all those are online now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ms. Perry wanted to conclude. Mr. Rosendahl for a second time.
I'm very delighted that the opportunities that you seem to be creating for some of the general city workers that could conceivably take over where you have contract workers. For instance, you have an equipment operator, and we have some of our ability in the city to do that. You have a tree surgeon, another tree surgeon. You have 2 or 3 or 4, there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different groups that you have contracts with that could conceivably be city workers. And I see where you're talking about discussions about various parts. Could you elaborate a little bit about the effort you're making to keep city workers by transferring them over to these contractors?
Sure. To the extent we have open positions or can diminish the use of outside contractors for qualified city folks, we'd love to have them.
Yeah. Thank you for going that direction.
Mr. Krikorian for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Buettner, as Mr. LaBonge said,
in some respects, I think DWP has a very good story to tell that often isn't told, and water efficiency is a great example. This city has done tremendous work in realizing water efficiencies. Similarly, I think we should focus a great deal of our attention on energy efficiency as a means to reducing our carbon emissions and so forth. And so when I see on page 10 of your presentation, there's a cost estimate of up to $10 billion for greenhouse gas AB 32 compliance. I'm a little disturbed by that sort of entry because I think it feeds into some misguided arguments by many that AB 32 compliance is going to have a disastrous economic impact on the state and so forth. And I think you would agree, would you not, that the specific policy decisions that we make for how we get to AB 32 compliance will cause that number to vary potentially greatly. It could be there could be a wide variance in what the cost estimate for AB 32 compliance is, depending on whether we choose to pursue it through an expensive renewable energy program, a less expensive renewable energy program, energy efficiency, or some other means.
Yeah, I think you'll see next week when we come, we'll talk about what our plan is.
Okay, good.
Again, AB 32 is still evolving, as we all know, but we do have a plan in place, and we'll talk about that next week.
Okay, and so next week when we have a more thorough discussion, will you also be discussing the feed-in tariff proposals and some other means that have been...
Yes, all those aspects.
Great, very good. And then, I guess finally, on the infrastructure and reliability comparison that's in the PowerPoint presentation, you draw a comparison with the major investor-owned utilities. I think it would be informative for us also to see a comparison of those numbers to the extent that it can be obtained with the other major municipal utilities in the state.
Yeah, we're delighted to share those. Again, most of those are materially smaller. A lot of them are underground. They're newer systems, but we have those figures. We'll share them with you.
Thank you very much. And I appreciated the comments you made about reaching out to the neighborhood councils and some of the other public efforts that you've made to draw public input. I'll look forward to working with your office and having a San Fernando Valley town hall or something else so that...
Good. There's actually one scheduled in the Valley this evening, so we welcome your attendance.
This evening?
This evening.
I would like to have known about that. That's good to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Labange.
Yeah, I just think one thing I did want to mention on the issue of the chemicals, Mr. Weezer was talking as far as the chlorine and chloride.
Chlorine to chloramine.
Chloramine. And
what that does, in simple terms, two different ways to disinfect. If you mix the two, they offset. So you can't mix water that's treated with chloramine with water that's treated with chlorine. If we switch to chloramine, which is the standard throughout the rest of the California water systems, we can swap water. It allows us, by swapping water, to avoid other infrastructure spending down the road.
Great. Now, the last time we went through this, and I'm looking over at some of the veterans, there was a big thing with the American Dental Association or some comment on that, and then it got confused for a while. It got straightened out. Have we reached out to the dental community? Because they had voices in the past. I'm just looking. I know it's fluoridation, but I could read your lips. Thanks, Paul. But at the same time, I don't believe if you ask somebody if there are chemicals in water, if you went down Hollywood Boulevard, they may not realize there are chemicals in water. There's chemicals in everything. But I know the last time, and I did have a little short time over there at 111 North Hope, it gets very confusing when you use the word chemical. And then what kind of chemicals are in our water? What are you putting in? So I just would want to forewarn you to try to exercise that.
Yeah, I know a lot of care and planning has gone into this, and we'll make sure the dentists and other in the medical community are on board.
Look that, and then also too, I know you're having a meeting tonight, and I know there's another one downtown. There's regional cities halls that sometimes are closer to get to and known to the community, and I hope at one time I will ask my community leadership to get a presentation from you or your team to understand the challenges that are there as we look forward to working together to try to improve all things Los Angeles with the Department of Water and Power and its citizens of this city. Thank you. I knew you were right.
Mr. Weezer.
My final question, before I ask it, I just want to thank your department for working with all of us to have some of our workers go over and do some of the future tree trimming and street resurfacing. I think that was a very good cooperation amongst several departments, so thank you for that. Renewable energy for your proposed budget for next year, are money for that going up or down compared to this past year? What is in that budget?
It's going down. We're doing what we can within the current rate structure. Our intention is to address that in more detail next week when we'll identify where we think we can find resource to invest in renewables other than rate.
Okay, so are we still on target with the mayor's goal of 20%?
We'll talk about that next week.
You're going to talk about that next week. Okay, where are you going to present that? In Energy Committee, I suppose?
We're going to present it to our commission on the 15th, which is Tuesday, and we'd be delighted to come back and do this again or whatever form you think is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garcetti?
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I look forward. I know we've talked about the policy piece, and I think we can dig into a lot of the policy issues in the forthcoming times. There's just one thing that caught my attention that I wanted to ask you about, which is the ratepayer advocate thing, which is we've all been quite involved on. You said you were looking forward to presenting something to the board. Can you walk us through what the process has been in developing that? I mean, certainly when we had the last iteration of rates, the council kind of stood up, said, we need to justify this and see why, and we had, I think, channeled the voice of a lot of Angelinos, a lot of businesses right now, small and big, as well as individuals. And one of the things I think we all looked forward to was having something that would help the department as well as us, but really be transparent to the public in terms of a ratepayer advocate. There's been different structures, and a lot of us have been talking to a lot of different people and hoping to have kind of an open process about that. But you talked about bringing something already to the board. Can you walk us through what the process has been? And am I mishearing you that you have a plan then that might be voted on as early as next week to have a ratepayer advocate without any kind of public discussions?
I recommend someone has to start somewhere. So our proposal is meant to be a foundation for that future public discussion. Again, we view the underlying tenets of a ratepayer advocate being a group of folks with enough information and experience to opine on the issues that are and research the issues that are at hand, the tools at their disposal to be able to communicate those to the community, and accountable to all of the different constituencies, council, the commission, the public at large, ratepayers of all sorts, big, small, and otherwise. So we're going to put a proposal forth. Obviously, absent council endorsement, we're just one piece of the whole puzzle, but we've decided that we're going to put forth our proposal, and then we welcome comment publicly. We welcome comment from council on that.
I suggest this in a friendly way, so it's not just a foundation, is it actually a concrete proposal for a complete ratepayer advocate enactment? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. As such, I mean, I think it might be a better process for us to not be putting a full cooked or voted on by anybody yet proposal forward. I've discussed, for instance, and I know Ms. Perry, Mr. Weezar, Mr. Smith, and others have had these discussions. We've been looking, for instance, in talking about how can we do this responsibly in the city charter, just as we did with police reform and Inspector General's office. Before we would locate it anywhere, whether it be in a political office, whether it be in a place that would just report to the council but wouldn't necessarily have the right information coming from the department. It's a combination of leadership and structure, and so we've talked with a lot of the sort of folks who have written, our founding fathers and mothers, as one way of looking at them, but the folks who wrote our charter reform. I sat down with Erwin Cherwinski, with Ray Sonnenschein, with a number of the professors that are looking at the sort of structural and legal issues around that. We've gotten some great feedback, but I think, to put something out right now, I don't want us to get to, I think you've made tremendous strides in this not being an adversarial relationship, and that says a lot about you and the team. And I would encourage you to make sure that is a broad conversation now, because if I'm not mistaken, no council members were necessarily involved with that.
Understand what we're intending to do. Okay, we're intending to make clear the commitments in the same vein of being transparent. The commitments the department can and will make in terms of funding a position, in terms of what we see the requisite information that those individuals need to conduct their jobs. We are not part of the political conversation. And I think some of the pressure you all hear from your constituents for us to become more transparent, a ratepayer advocate is an important foundation. So we wish to make it clear to our ratepayers that we'll make a commitment as a department. If it takes 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years to sort out all of the other framework in which it sits, that's fine. We want to be a willing participant. We want to make it clear we're ready to go now. We want to make it clear we're ready to fund
So
it.
it's more principles of what sort of financial commitments you can make. It doesn't talk about the governance, because I could appreciate you saying political, but it's really a governance question of what is the governance around this. And it gets to the heart of what a ratepayer advocate can be. I trust you. I think we've talked enough about it, and I do trust you. I trust people who are in individual offices, but we're looking at something that goes beyond when the personalities change. That's been the problem in the past. So I think the governance of this is really critical, and even the buy-in to that governance structure. I'm not sure what the hurry would be on the governance side of things, but, a statement of principles as a starting point that this department is committed to funding something that would be independent, we're not saying yet where it would be, but that would have access to DWP financial information, et cetera. Some of the things we've talked about that was frustrating for you from the outside, certainly is frustrating for us.
This will be our statement of principles.
Okay. So it will not necessarily have the governance as part of that.
I think we have suggestions as to governance. You may have other suggestions, and that's, again, we're not a voting participant in those deliberations. We want to make it very clear what the department can and do effective immediately to make sure that the rest of the discussion, someone else is on the clock, not us. As a department, I don't want to be asked the question again next week or the week after, where does our ratepayer advocate stand? I'd like to be able to say, here's our proposal. It says exactly what the department can do to be one of the collaborators here, and it's up to the rest of the other participants to decide.
We can talk offline about this, but just one last comment on this. I would encourage you, before a proposal comes forward from the department, even though you've come from outside, I think that gets to the heart of the mistrust. It gets tainted from the beginning if somebody says, well, this is DWP policing itself, whereas if we can do it with a coalition of folks, not something that politicizes it. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in somebody who's always going to say no to rate increases. Then I think we'll be farther ahead. So we can discuss it further.
You'll see in our statement of principles, like we've tried to do with our budget, if we can't articulate in one page that an average ratepayer can read and understand what this ratepayer advocate's supposed to do, I think we've all failed, and I think we're going to make an attempt to do that.
Always better together.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. Ms. Perry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just to close, Mr. Buettner and the Department of Water and Power will be back in Energy and Environment Committee sometime next week. We're looking for a date for him to come and do the second portion of the presentation. And just understand that this information that he is sharing with us is viewed and should be viewed with respect to impact to the ratepayer, what potential future increases may occur, and the basis for that, whether the debt reduction trust fund can be used to mitigate future rate increases, issues like that. And we'll be able to get into that in more depth after it comes back to committee. Then we'll come back to council. One last question, Mr. Buettner, for the record. The department has received significant ARA funding, and we are in a hiring freeze. And I wanted to know whether you have oversight in place to ensure that the ARA money is spent appropriately, not only appropriately, but in a timely manner.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'd be delighted to give you a full reckoning and report. I don't have it at my disposal, but I know we've asked the question, and we have a team in place to make sure it's spent in accordance with the rules and in a timely manner.
All right, and if you will, I'd like to get some more details when we have the second phase of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that concludes the council comments. We do have a number of public comment cards. Mr. Buettner, if you'd please be seated. Thank you very much. First one is Dr. Clyde Williams.
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA, DWP liaison for the LA 32 Neighborhood Council. The DWP appears to be treated like a toy. This is a very expensive toy. However, it's not expensive enough. How about more money? How about $200 million to bring up the replacement of assets to a 1% per year? That is a 100-year life on pipes and cables. That's how much it would cost. So why aren't we doing it? The usual is 2%. I don't know if we can afford 2%. Other people may. So you need to increase the total for the replacement of infrastructure. The computer system has been a joke for a long time. LA Fire Department and Building and Safety have the same joke. I hope those are replaced also, perhaps using the same system. That would be nice. Conservation. The word conservation is mentioned 3 times. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. We don't know, because we don't know a lot of things, because transparency isn't the issue. We have a memorandum of understanding with the DWP. However, we weren't informed in a timely fashion, but we were told that timely fashion is defined by DWP, and 3 days really doesn't allow neighborhood councils to respond. But in the background, the central issue is there's no strategic plan that has been going on for over 2 years, and the hope of having it done this year in a timely fashion so that we can compare it against the budget would be nice, but it hasn't been done in 2 years, so why do we expect it to be done in a timely fashion? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. And I'm sorry for interrupting. The computers were off here. Sean Murphy?
Good afternoon. I'm for the projects, but now it's not. We are in a bad economy right now. Now it's not a good time to raise the DWP. They're asking for 5% in July. Next thing they're going to ask for 8%. Next year they're going to ask for 10%. And the following year they're going to ask for 20%. I think this is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. And Van Nuys, Donna Pearman?
Thank you. Anyway, maybe Arizona can raise the rent on the building that we own over there. Anyway, for the DWP. Our DWP is misusing our money on our green projects. Mr. Garcetti will find a way to get that solar panels in, too. A lot of money is spent on studies which ends up confusing results. We taxpayers end up with a huge DWP bill. DWP wasn't right in giving their employees a pay raise when all the other employees gave up theirs. So maybe I say let's make the DWP give up their raise. And I was only going to take a minute on this because I want to speak on another project. Anyway, the Daily News did mention that the DWP was getting their raise when all the rest of the city employees wasn't giving theirs. Okay, thank you.
And again, in Van Nuys, Rick Nightingale?
Oh, he had to leave because he had to go to work.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comments on this item. This is a note and file item, so we will open the roll on the note and file. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That concludes that. Next item.
Mr. President, item 2 was called special by Councilmember Parks to go into closed session. Do you wish to take that up or hold that on the desk?
Why don't we do the other ones? No. Is that okay?
Do it last? Okay.
Let's do that last.
Next item.
Item 4 was called special by Councilmember Huizar.
Mr. Huizar.
Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention that we have in Alvera Street a street named after a former mayor of the city of Los Angeles, Vicente Sanchez. It is a little street that as you leave the kiosk, it goes towards City Hall. The names have gone down for some reason, but thanks to a LA Times article that came out recently, and also Mr. Labange, we put forward a motion to put up the signs. The signs have already gone up, which is great news to keep the history of the city going forward. However, the commission from El Pueblo is looking to put up some historical signs so that we give proper recognition to these streets. We don't want to proceed forward without us recognizing and knowing our history, and certainly this is one street that deserves to have the name of Vicente Sanchez put back up so that we could continue our history here in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and on number 4, please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That's approved. Next item, please.
Item 23, called special for cards.
Dr. Williams on item 23.
Item 23, an audit of the Recreation and Parks Department. Interesting. However, it should be expanded to include all land leases, because the Autry National Center has had a land lease for a long time and has never complied with its lease agreements. So if you're going to apply it against the concessions, you should also review all of the land lease agreements of the Recreation and Parks Department and make sure that they comply with the city's general attitude as charging full fair market value for the lease of 11 acres per year, which would work out to about $500,000, which coincides with the amount that the Autry National Center deems as being a donation from the City of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. We'll go ahead and open the roll on that item. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Thank you. That is approved. Next item, please.
Item 25, called special for cards.
All right. Mr. Nightgale is gone. Ms. Pearman, 25?
Yeah. Anyway, I think you should recuse yourself because you're in the Navy. It's unconstitutional what you're doing. This will be thrown out. We're wasting our money on cities. All cities have the right to make their own laws. They're fighting a war. With all the problem facing Los Angeles, we have problems. We need to deal with Los Angeles and its budget. Our businesses going under, our man-made problem with closing collectives, lost revenue, and we spend our time looking at other people's backyards, others' countries, and now a lawsuit on Arizona. Arizona is trying to take care of their borders. Yes, terrorists slip in to Mexico, to Arizona, and California. Also, we have no idea who is here. Yes, that is a problem. How can we spend our resources if we don't even know how many immigrants are using our resources? Arizona is right. We have a problem. They can only be asked to show proof if they're stopped for something else. You have to look at the law. They're not just stopping them right and left. There is a big problem with terrorism going in from Arizona, and you don't have the right to tell Arizona that it can't take care of its problems, can't take care of its borders, and can't have safety issues. We should be dealing with taking care of our own problems and having our own laws and taking care of our budget deficit problems and taking care of our city employees and not asking, oh yeah, by the way, Miriam meant to be here, but she's not feeling well. She wanted to speak on this too. We have no right to do this to Arizona. We have our own problems. We should be taking care of our city employees and give them what they should, what they're right. Thank you.
Thank you. Please tell Ms. Fogler we hope she feels better. That will close our public comment. We have a vote on this item now. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
7 ayes, 3 noes.
Okay, that does not carry. Next item, please.
And I believe pursuant to the rules, that will carry over to tomorrow's meeting.
Okay, that will carry over to tomorrow. Donna Pearman is next on 29, if you'd like to speak on item 29.
29, yeah. A lot of people depend on this commuter express. They're always filled to the capacity. It's already cost a lot on the fare. The monthly fare for a commuter express for disabled is a lot more than TA TAP. They already charge enough money a long time ago, and we also have no idea what the increase is. So a lot of people, they have to get money from the businesses to help pay for the mass transit. I know from my work, the federal employees pay for the mass transit, and I don't know how much I'm going to be asking them to increase this for. A lot of people use these commuter expresses because they're a lot better than taking the MTA. The MTA will take about an hour or over an hour, while this commuter express can get me to West Los Angeles in a lot shorter period of time. So I don't like this increase, and I don't even know what the increase is. Thank you.
Thank you. We can open the roll on 29, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That will go over to a second reading next week as an ordinance. And Mr. Labange, doesn't look like we're going to get 12 members, so let's open the roll. And Mr. Labange is the ordinance on 28. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Okay, and that will carry over as well. We have item 32, and that was called special by Mr. Smith.
Yes, just briefly, ladies and gentlemen, today is Election Day. I think Janice Hahn mentioned that about something going on today, an election or something. But there's an item on today's agenda as an opportunity. I know Mr. Koretz felt very strongly about this, as I do. That Proposition 13 on today's agenda, election, is to protect people from doing earthquake repairs for their property, whether it's business or home, and then getting reappraised for doing that earthquake repair in a state where we should be encouraging people to do that. Actually, some counties have been reappraising properties. And so Prop 13 today on the ballot protects Prop 13 in a sense and protects people's ability to protect their property without getting appraised. So I just wanted this opportunity. I know Paul wanted to mention if he's left again, that this is important to the people of LA and California, and we hope they'll all go out and vote today for Janice Hahn on the Democrat side, and as well as Prop 13. Thank you, Mr. President.
Just in the nick of time, we'll take a vote. Let's go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That is approved. That leaves us just with number 2, which Mr. Parks had called special for closed session. If we can go ahead and we'll go into executive session, discuss our labor negotiations with our CAO, and we'll come back into open session when we are done with that. Thank you.
They're going good.
go to the restroom during closed session. Uh-huh. Joel's taking on. Quite the rally on
We're back in open session as a courtesy to a colleague, Mr. Rosendahl, who's on the prevailing side. Move to reopen item 25. We can please open the roll. This is just on the reconsideration. This is not the vote. Please open the roll on just on reconsideration, not on the vote. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
9 ayes, 1 no.
And then if we can open the roll on the item itself now. Please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
8 ayes, 2 noes.
Okay, that is approved. We are going to continue our closed session deliberations. Our apologies. I know we had a member of the public come back in, and we're going to go back into closed session. Thank you. We'll come back into open session on this item in a moment. If we do take any other action, we can go back into executive session. Thank you. We're back in open session. Next order of business, please.
And there was no action required on item 2.
Thank you for that.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Those are posted and referred.
And the rest is clear.
All right. Any announcements, colleagues? Have any announcements? Yes, Ms. Hahn.
Thank you. We've mentioned it several times today, but this is Election Day in the state of California. This is our primary. Just want to urge everyone to go out and vote, and wanted to give a special shout out to Laker fans. The game starts at 6. So we want to encourage all of you Laker fans to go and vote before you sit down and watch that game, because we think once you sit down and watch that game, you're probably not going to leave and go vote. So vote before the Laker game starts. Go Lakers, but show your civic duty as well and vote today before 6 p.m. Thank you.
Mr. Cardenas.
To all voters, Laker fans and non-Laker fans, remember the polls close at 8 p.m. So if you get to the polls at 7:59, by law, you're allowed to vote, even though it's going to take you more than 1 minute to actually be in there and vote. As long as you get to the polls before 8 p.m., they are required to allow you to vote. They'll probably close the door behind you, and if you get out of there at 8:15, 8:20, either way, as long as you get to the door of the polling place before 8 p.m., you are required to be allowed to vote. So remember that.
Safe.
Yes.
Vote before 6.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Labange, did you have some, or is that just from before? Okay, Mr. Parks?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to invite the public to a meeting at the CRA on tomorrow at noon to 1:30 to meet with the newly appointed CRA commissioner, and their office is at 4401 Crenshaw Boulevard. Also, DWP will be meeting out in South LA at the Crenshaw DWP office on Crenshaw and King Boulevard on Monday, June the 14th at 7 p.m. to receive a presentation on their this year's, upcoming year's budget. And the final one is that LAPD and the fire department are having a summer tip-off basketball game at the sports arena on Saturday, June the 12th, and it's for charity, and so we'd encourage everyone come out and support the two departments.
Announcements, colleagues? Yes, Mr. Alarcon.
I just wanted to announce that the Jobs and Business Retention Committee will meet 15 minutes after the close of this meeting.
Thank you. Other announcements? If not, can I ask people please rise for adjourning motions? Mr. Alarcon will...
Council members,
I'm sorry, hold on 1 second. I can ask everybody in council chambers to please rise. Thank you. Go ahead.
Council members, I'm sure others of you may have comments regarding Coach John Wooden, but I wanted to introduce the adjourning motion because I've been very privileged to get to know John because of his family who introduced me to Coach Wooden at Aliso High School, which is a continuation school next door to Cleveland High. Paul Trapani is married to John Wooden's granddaughter, and they renamed the school after John Wooden, and so it was very much my pleasure to be there. In fact, if you go into my office, one of my favorite pictures is a picture that doesn't have me in it, and it's a picture of Kirk Douglas and John Wooden. And it was the day that we were changing the name of Aliso High School to John Wooden High School. And it really is a tribute to the fact that John Wooden was not just a coach. He was a teacher, and that was what he was most proud of. Not only was he a teacher, but just about everybody in his family are teachers. His grandchildren, his children, and I believe his parents and his brother were all teachers. I had the chance to sit down with him and have lunch I think it was TGIF in Simi Valley, believe it or not. We had just honored him at at his son's career day in Simi Valley, and they asked me to speak. And after that, we went to lunch. And I don't know how to explain this, but we've had the opportunity to meet some amazing people as elected officials, particularly here in Los Angeles. But I can't tell you of anybody else I've met who, when you were talking to him, you actually felt like you were actually experiencing true goodness. He was a man who worked very hard to not cause harm but create love. And I think, notwithstanding the tremendous accomplishments that I'm sure Tom LaBonge could list without looking at notes, even though he's writing a few notes, about the amazing UCLA Bruins and the special run that he spearheaded. It is not, as much as I'm a fan of sports, it is not that gets me to speak. It is because of what he offered us in terms of his pyramid for life, which you'll find in my office, which explains the various principles of how to become a holistic human being in his way. But I can tell you, he was just a man who was humbling and who lived his life, and I believe a long life, 99 years, because of his belief system. I've used his books in my Young Senators Leadership Program and have given copies to them because his simplistic concepts of leadership and how to experience life in a positive way are easy to understand. In fact, sometimes they're so easy that you could just overcome them. I remember him telling me that the most important thing that he would do when coaching was the very first thing he would teach his basketball players was how to tie their shoelaces. And it's almost funny when you think about it, but think about what the consequences would be if a basketball player's shoelaces were not tied properly. They could lose circulation, their shoes could fall off, they could break an ankle, so many things. But I think more than the actual tying your shoelaces, as practical as that is, I think it was the message he was saying, that you have to take care of the little things, you have to focus on the little things in order to achieve great things. Los Angeles has lost a tremendous leader. They have lost a tremendous educator, somebody who is renowned throughout the world. And think about it, not too many coaches are renowned throughout the world, but he has achieved that. He was, of course, honored with the same honor as his mentor, Mother Teresa, with the Humanitarian Award. How many coaches get humanitarian awards? When you see other coaches knocking down people, running into the field and knocking down people, or throwing chairs, we all know who we're thinking of, or swearing or yelling at their players. It is amazing to think how Teacher Wooden would use his calm, his humanitarian heart to educate people not just about how to play basketball, but how to be a good human being. So it is with great honor that on behalf of the family, particularly the Trapanis who introduced me to him, that I ask that we adjourn in the memory of a great teacher for America and somebody who I think is revered throughout the world, John Wooden.
Thank you. Mr. LaBonge.
Yeah, a great coach is a great teacher, and And surprisingly enough, Coach Wooden also was a great athlete, a three-time All-American at Purdue, where he led the Boilermakers to their first championship in 1932. Ironically enough, with Mr. Parks on the celebration of his installation of the plaque at the Peristyle, Vince Scully was also at that event. This is just recently. And Vince Scully spoke of, as a young announcer when he came with the Dodgers, how he walked with a bag of groceries to his apartment on a little street off San Vicente in the West Los Angeles area, and it was Coach Wooden, a young coach at UCLA, who opened the gate, the little picket fence, to allow Vinny to get in and bring his groceries in. He was truly a remarkable human being who, as Mr. Garcetti recited to me, sent a love letter every 21st of the month to his wife, his lovely wife. He was a warrior and a builder of men in his sense of what was repeated to me by Milt Davis, who was my mentor, and just a few short years ago had a chance to visit with Coach Wooden in this building and reminisced about some old UCLA athletes, and he was so on top of it. He truly was a remarkable human being, and I asked, Mr. President, that we ask our special assistants in the CLA office to prepare a signature for everybody to sign for Coach Wooden.
Sure, absolutely. And I know the flags are at half-mast today throughout the city for him. Are there adjourning motions? Okay. Mr. LeBon's
motion, and I'd like to ask that you join with me that we ask adjourn in memory of Richard Duke Llewellyn of the Los Angeles Athletic Club, who grew up in Los Angeles, was an all-star athlete at Loyola High School and later an all-star athlete at USC, helped develop and operate the Los Angeles Athletic Club. And he also was very involved in the Southern California Committee for the '84 Olympic Games. He also initiated the John Wooden Award that's given to the greatest collegiate athlete. He lived a good life as well. He survived by his sons Mark and Mike and daughter Debbie and several grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He was a dear friend to John Farrar and Tom Bradley and anyone of that era who was really involved in bringing the games to Los Angeles in '84. I ask we adjourn in memory of Richard Duke Llewellyn.
Thank you. We'll add Ms. Perry to that as well. Ms. Perry.
Thank you, and I'd like to be on that. Thank you, Mr. LeBonge. Mr. Parks, did you want to go on that one too, for Duke Llewellyn? Yes. All right, and I want to share the passing of the mother of someone we all know, and he is Ira Handelman. Her name was Vera Handelman. She passed at the age of 93 on June 1st, 2010, of natural causes. She was born in Irvington, New Jersey on October 29th, 1916, and she was married for over 55 years to her beloved husband, Robert, or Bob, who died in 2002. Vera lived most of her life in New Jersey before moving with Bob to Los Angeles in the mid-1970s. She was a devoted mother and grandmother who loved to cook and take care of her home. She and Bob enjoyed an active social life with their friends. Vera is survived by her children Judy, Ira, Richard, grandchildren Jill, Jeremy, Ariel, Sam, Kate, and Pam, and great-grandchild Jessica. She will be deeply missed by all.
Thank you. We'll add Mr. Reeser and Mr. Alarcon on those. Thank you. There's no other adjourning motions. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?